Did you know that the tactical clothes you wear could actually give you away against an enemy with the power of night vision? Let's say you have a buddy who lives in his mom's basement still. He used her credit card to buy some Chinese knockoff military uniforms, and his mom's been washing it in the wrong kind of detergent for years. And when he's walking beside you and the boys, he just lights up like a glowing Christmas tree. Unacceptable. That's how you deal with nerds like that. So today we're gonna take over 100 different military uniforms and we're gonna compare them under night vision to show you guys what camouflages work, whether or not they glow, whether Chinese versus knockoffs look different or not, what washing them incorrectly for a long period of time can do to them, if anything, and show you just exactly what will give you away to an enemy with the power of night vision. In the tactical and LARPing world, there's this big controversy between knockoff Chinese uniforms and the real official military uniforms like you see from Crop Precision, and is one better than the other, especially in terms of NIR compliance? I know it's a weird word. What the heck does that even mean?
I really don't know what he said at the end of that sentence.
Well, as far as night vision users are concerned, NIR compliance is a big deal. NIR means near infrared. And basically it's all the light that your naked eye cannot see, but cats or people, when they're looking through night vision, can pick up. It's the light that night vision sees, but not your naked eye. So NIR compliant clothing is clothing that retains the same visual principles under night vision as it does to the naked eye. In other words, if you can see a camo pattern during the day, you should still be able to see that camo pattern under night vision if your clothing is NIR compliant. It should be able to retain its visual properties in the IR spectrum and is designed to mimic the radiation levels around the wearer. Now here's what it is not, because a lot of people are very confused about what this actually means. It does not make you invisible. It does not mean that you magically match the environment around you in the middle of the night. And it also does not mean that non-NIR compliant clothing isn't just as effective.
See, there's a belief that if you don't have 100% NIR compliant clothing, it's going to mean that you are going to glow out of the squad or fire team that you're running around with, while they all have 100% USA made, never been washed in optic brightening detergent, and then you are going to be the individual that sticks out like a chem light while everyone else is blending in like a cat into the darkness. Is that the reality though? So we went and collected over 100 articles of clothing, more than 50 complete uniforms, and we are going to test whether this NIR compliance is a myth or reality.
Specifically, we are going to be answering 4 questions. Number 1, how do Chinese knockoff uniforms actually compare under night vision to real official US made ones? Can you ruin your uniforms by washing them incorrectly with the wrong kind of laundry detergent that has optical brighteners in them? Which patterns work under night vision and which ones don't? And what kind of fabrics work well and which ones don't? Now there will be one of 2 outcomes. We are either going to prove that Chinese clothing and knockoffs are just as good and you can wash them in whatever you want and it's not gonna matter, and the fabrics don't even really matter. None of this NIR compliance is really that important. Or we're gonna prove that the clothes that you wear and how you treat them and what you wash them in and where you buy them from can actually get you killed and thus save a life. So we're either gonna save you money or save your life. Let's get into the test. Guys, it's not every day that you get to have sponsors for your YouTube channel who were your friends previously and you were also customers of long before you ever started your business. Thankfully, that is the case with us, especially on this video. So first and foremost, Steel Industries. We are talking about night vision. If you're looking to get it, we've known those guys for years. Their customer service is unparalleled in my opinion, and those guys go out and actually shoot stuff under nods with laser aiming devices all the time. Also that, number 1, they're gonna have a great time, but also number 2, they can answer all your questions really easily. Also, if you live in the Florida area, especially Central Florida, you can head to their shop and actually hand pick your tubes, whether you're going the budget route or the super fancy route. They are the best choice in my opinion, and they're good dudes. Also 100 Concepts. I knew those guys back before they even had a name for their company. We're super pumped to see how successful they've been. One of the things that they make are scrims. So helmet scrim, but also scrim for your packs. And scrim is one of those topics we didn't go over in this video, but having scrim that is the correct kind of fabric will drastically reduce your IR signature. This is actually one of the things that does matter in my opinion, on top of the fact that it's great camo during the day.
Finally guys, Venture Surplus. If you're lucky enough to actually watch this video close to when it comes out in November of 2024, you guys got to pay attention to Venture Surplus because they are running a 50% off sale for clothing and gear. Some of it's been previously issued, some of it was just a military overrun, and you can go buy everything from M81 field tops to sleeping equipment, or even something like this Cry Precision half jack. Save yourself some money. Information is in the description. Again, 50% off from November 12th through the 29th. Let's get back to the video. But we didn't just lay this kit on a table or on the ground and shine an IR light at it in the dark. While that can be a decent test for a quick check on how that camo actually looks under IR, it's just not the same as actually coming out into the woods and wearing the equipment. Now you also have to keep in mind that we pulled off this test wearing every piece of kit and every piece of pants and shirts in comparison in one night in one location with the same moonlight settings. But there are still so many different variables that we can't control. You could take any of these shirts or pants and go into an urban area or go way out into the open with different moonlight, with different tree canopies, and you might see varying results. The best that we could do was take everything that we had, put it on, and go to varying distances, all within the same moonlight in the same location. And that's what we did.
Now, we could have filmed all this through our fancy night vision Sony camera, but that's not the same. It's just not realistic. Just like shining lights on something 2 feet away is not realistic. So we shot all these through actual, like, very nice DTMBSs. Everyone says they're great. Everyone says they're the best.
Nobody has better toys than I do.
And the reason why we did this is because within this conversation, there's so much like elitism and nerds who are just like, oh, well, that's not NIR compliance, so I'm gonna spot someone immediately. That's just not the case, man. We've looked at thousands of people under nods, and when you're in a sterile environment, yeah, it's really easy to see stuff and see different like camo patterns or different types of clothing under night vision. But when you're out in the woods hunting airsofters to ruin their days so they go home and cry to mom, it's different. You can't see people super well when you're out in the thick of stuff. And so the distances that we went were 5, 20, and 50 yards. Because beyond 50, when you're in a wooded environment or when you're around any kind of like structures or stuff, like people can hide, and there's the trees, the bushes that hide people really well. So we wanted to give you guys an accurate representation of what all of these looked like under an actual night vision unit. And for IR illumination, so in other words, this is a flashlight. This is a Surefire X300 Vampire, so it goes from white light to IR light, and we were able to shine IR light with this onto the person at varying distances. So you can see, does this material or do any of these camo patterns actually reflect light really well, right? Problem is, when you're really close to something, even at night, if you're really close to something, if you have a powerful flashlight, that beam is going to completely obscure the pattern. You're gonna glow because you're so close no matter what. So that's why it was so important for us to go at distance, hit someone with IR light to see if at distance someone still pops or glows. First test, how do the Chinese uniforms look compared to the official uniforms? Josh, how'd you think this was gonna go?
I like to think that the American-made stuff is actually going to perform better, probably because I've spent a fair amount of money on the actual Cry products, but we'll see.
Yeah, I'm kind of hoping that there's not a difference because I like to buy the cheap stuff for LARPing. Okay, so first up we have Multicam Tropic. Both Josh and I have brand new pairs on. Mine is from Korea, made by Samapo Gear. It's an airsoft knockoff, and he is wearing actually official Cry Precision G4 Combats. As you notice, when they get hit with light, we tend to glow, but that's because the light is so close to our bodies. The same thing would happen if you shine a flashlight up against a wall. But then we back up to 20 yards and we use the IR light almost as an ambient light. We're bouncing it off the trees, the canopy, the environment around us, and we tend to pop less because the light is not directly on us. Same thing at 50 yards, we pretty much disappear unless we're directly hit by the light, which you would have the same effect even if it was on a tree.
Moving on to Multicam Arid, Drew is wearing the Flash Force G3 uniform made in China, and I am wearing the Crye Precision G3 uniforms. Now, like I mentioned, my opinion was that the USA manufactured ones are gonna just blend in a lot better, and that was not the case. Even to just the naked eye looking through nods, you really can't tell the difference between those two uniforms. Same story, when you hit them with IR light, they really start to wash out. And you're probably looking here at 50 yards and able to see, hey, I can pick out a person. That's true, but you got to keep in mind, we are standing out in the open. We're trying to really get a good look at the patterns themselves, which doesn't really make a difference. Next up, we're comparing M81, the Chinese Emerson gear, and the USA-made Crye G3 field pants. Oh my goodness, first of all, look at God's Plaid M81. The pattern itself really does, it actually shows under IR. But this is probably the biggest discrepancy that we've seen in any pattern. The M81 made in America versus China does have a difference.
So if there's no discernible difference between Chinese knockoffs and the actual US made ones, which brand should I buy? Well, we went out and bought 3 of the main brands, some of the most popular ones on Amazon, and it doesn't matter who makes it from China, it all tends to look the same. In some cases, we even discovered that the material they're using is actually sourced from the US, but it's too inconsistent to say for sure exactly where everyone in China gets their multicam material from. So can you ruin your uniforms by washing them incorrectly? The internet is full of rumors that if you wash your uniforms with detergents that have optical brighteners in it, which is almost all of them out there these days, anything made by Tide has optical brighteners in it, it will make your clothes glow under nods or pop under nods. Well, we got some fresh sets of NIR, these are the Kandahar combat uniforms. They sent them out to us for free. We didn't pay for them, so that meant that we could do whatever we wanted to them. So one set we kept completely brand new, fresh, and the other set we dumped loads of optical brightening laundry detergent on it and washed it over a dozen times. So theoretically, one should stand out more than the other. We'll let you guys decide for yourselves. Now, one of us here has the optical brighteners just packed into our clothing, and as you can see, there's not a discernible difference. So which one do you actually think it is?
I was dead wrong. I thought there was going to be a big difference. And I'll also reiterate, you cannot tell just with the naked eye to night vision. That is truly what it looks like. I was impressed.
What is super cool is how both camouflages actually retained their camouflage properties. And even over at 20 yards, you still can't tell a difference. One is not catching ambient light and glowing more than the other. And at 50, it's the same story. Now, why was Josh carrying around a Glock throughout that whole bit? I don't know, it was dark. Okay, so maybe that's not definitive enough for you. We'll just keep this in mind. If NIR compliance stuff is so important, and if optical brighteners just destroy your clothes under night vision, then what about all these dudes who've been in the military for years who I know have not given a rip about what they wash their stuff in? We went out to Steve and one of our other buddies who have been in the military for years, and we asked them, hey, how did you wash your stuff whenever, whenever you were in the barracks or whatever before you went out on a mission? And every single one of them told them, oh, we didn't care what we washed them with. It was whatever was in there. Tide, the other brands, like cheap brands, they all had optical brighteners in it. I looked it up. And they've just been washing these over and over and over again for years, right? One of the guys that we asked, he said, oh, you think Private First Class gave a rip about what he washed his clothes in? No.
Absolutely not.
And yet they never notice anybody in their crew standing out under night vision when they're actually out in the field using it. Here's a great example of 2 uniforms that have been actually used in combat. This Rhodesian brushstroke field top was actually issued in the Rhodesian Bush War and was made in the mid-70s. Still retains its camouflage pattern, and the Marpats are way, way worn out, and yet it still looks good. And this is the full Marpat Woodland Frogs FR combat uniform. This has been washed terribly over years and years and years of use, and yet it still retains all of its NIR compliant properties.
So I bought these M81 field tops and bottoms from Venture Surplus, and God knows what had happened to them, and even still they are retaining some camo properties out to 20 yards. You could PID someone with that pattern. And then moving on to AOR 2, these are the Patagonia tops and bottoms. And once again, they are still retaining their properties even after being washed numerous times. So does detergent actually matter? We don't think so. You make your own judgment. So which patterns actually work under NODs and which ones don't? This is truly where NIR compliance actually comes into play. So not only were we comparing something like multicam to M81, we're also taking a look at solid colors under night vision compared to different kinds of camouflage. Again, this is where people really start to get into the nitty-gritty, and we just had to see it for ourselves.
So first let's compare different multicam patterns, because multicam is supposed to be relatively NIR compliant. Well, what you see right here is that even if we had Tropic or the original or multicam era, they all did a decent job at retaining their camouflage properties. And one thing that we did notice is that the darker the camouflage pattern, the more it tends to retain its camouflage under IR light. The lighter you go with the multicam arids and even like other patterns like AOR1, the more washed out and kind of solid they begin to look like.
Moving on to the two most popular camo patterns that we see in the civilian industry, M81 and of course multicam. An interesting observation for you is that multicam actually seems to blend really, really well with the noise or the graininess of night vision. So that's one side to advocate for. On the other hand, M81 simply does a phenomenal job of retaining its properties under night vision. It's impressive.
Next, we're comparing a pattern to a solid color. We have M81 Woodland and Ranger Green, and this is really where you start to see the difference between NIR compliant clothing, because the Woodland still retains, again, its camo properties, whereas the Ranger Green is just a solid, just like what it would look like during the daytime. Now, this doesn't mean that solids are a bad choice or that they're going to give you away, but also know that within solids you will have different effects. For example, we have a black Cry top versus a Ranger Cry top, and you will notice a stark difference between the two.
Next, the fabrics that are actually hosting the camouflage. What is that fabric made of, and how does that actually change what we're seeing under night vision? So this is a combat top, which has become really popular recently with the past 20-year war, where you have your cotton Nico blend on the outside on your sleeves, and then down on the inside, for a little bit more of a comfort factor, we have a polyester or just cotton blend. And you will see a discrepancy between these two under night vision. You'll even have some of that same material down here where you need some extra stretch around the knees on these Cry G3 pants. But if you start to get into field tops, something like this would be 100% Nico. And that's where it is no polyester blend, it is all M81, and there's no discrepancy between the two. You can, again, do the same thing with field pants.
Now right here shows the difference between a field top and a combat top. It all comes down to the material. Most field tops are a 50-50 blend of nylon and cotton. It's called Nico. Nico has been the standard for years, even before night vision really became a thing. So even old surplus uniforms are usually made with Nico. It's crazy how most of the old clothes that you find from surplus stores are actually somewhat NIR compliant. They certainly don't reflect because they are made out of Nico. Combat tops are different because their sleeves and their body are made up of two different materials. The sleeves are usually some sort of Nico, but the bodies are often 100% cotton or some sort of cotton polyester blend. And the cotton poly blends do tend to reflect a bit more, but it reflects in an area that is typically covered up with a plate carrier. And when you throw a plate carrier on there, as you can see, it really breaks up whatever solid light might be bouncing off of that polyester and cotton. Now, some Patagonia tops use a monocrylic rayon and lycra blend. Lycra is also used in the Norarm top. Everyone says black doesn't exist in nature. It kind of does in some ways, but certainly at night when you're wearing black under night vision, that can actually stand out a lot. And that's not because it's reflecting light, it's just because it's absorbing it, way more so than anything else. The trees, the foliage, even the ground, that all reflects light. So if you have a material that's actually absorbing light, that is what stands out. Here the Cries have a monocrylic viscose nylon body, the True Spec field top is a cotton poly blend, and the Norarm rain shirt, which you would think just by looking at it in the daytime would really reflect under night vision, it doesn't. It's an 83 nylon,
17 spandex blend. The Russians are kind of dropping the ball with the Gorka BDU Spetsnaz Model 4. It is an 80-20 polyester cotton blend, and typically when you have more polyester than you have cotton, you start to get more reflectivity. But this is also because the Gorka has some slight water repellency, and this is something we're going to come back to. Now, what about hunting clothes? Because everyone says that hunting camo is garbage under night vision. Well, it depends on what kind of fabric you have and what that fabric is treated with. Here are two examples of hunting outfits. One is just a standard cotton blend. It's a normal field top, and you can actually see the camo pattern pretty well. Now, it doesn't have a label on it, and it's not promoted as an NIR compliant uniform, but my goodness, it is. Whereas Josh's Under Armour uniform is made of 91% polyester, 9% elastane, but it's also heavily treated with water repellent, and you can tell just by feeling the material that it feels somewhat plasticky. This makes the light bounce. This destroys the NIR properties of the camo pattern. You cannot see the camo. And this is going to be true for just about any kind of top that you're wearing that is a rain cover of sorts. It is designed to repel things, including light, and it repels more light, and it covers up whatever pattern it might have on it. Now, this is where something like the Wetworks Summer Combat Hoodie is an absolute game changer, because they're oversized, so they're designed to actually fit over your other clothing, and it's made of 250 NIR knit mesh, and so you can throw that on something that's not NIR compliant, or something that kind of pops the light back, and it will definitely mute it down. So fabrics do matter. They matter a lot, but what matters even more than the fabric is what the fabric is treated with. This is different than the dyes that are in it, and we'll get to that, but the treatments themselves can make a huge impact, whether it's fire retardant, insect repellent, water repellent. All those kinds of sprays can have an impact depending on how thick you coat them.
So I'll be honest, I went into this very biased because I've seen so much controversy over NIR compliant clothing and materials for years, and yet I've been out watching literally thousands of people under night vision in a variety of environments, urban, rural, woodland, you name it, and not once have I ever noticed someone because of their clothes. It was always for another reason, which Josh is going to touch on here in a second. But what we can see from this, and remember, this is just one data point. Actually, it's about 100 data points. But what we can see here is that, first of all, the knockoff clothing doesn't really matter all that much. Washing them in optical brighteners under nods doesn't really matter that much. Patterns are absolutely king, but only certain patterns, and it depends on what kind of fabric they're on, because fabric is the GOAT. The kind of fabric that it's all put on, that's what matters probably more than anything else. Now, one thing that we have left out is a discussion on dyes and what all of these clothes are dyed with and how that affects NIR compliance. Well, the problem is that there's very little publicly available information on the dyes used in all these clothes, even US ones. It's like, good luck finding that information. We scoured the internet trying to find it for even a single brand, and it was basically not out there. But there is one thing that we can deduce from looking at over 100 different articles of clothing. They likely all have different dyes. They're not all different, but numerous different kinds of dyes in all of these. And we didn't see a discernible difference. So do dyes matter? Maybe. But from what I've seen, not very much.
So big takeaways for me. If you came here curious about the best camo pattern under night vision, to my eye, M81 does the best job. And I think the reason for that is because the patterns themselves on the camo are larger, and you can actually see that pattern under night vision. When your signal to noise ratio is struggling to pick up detail, the black and the shapes in M81 did a phenomenal job. Secondary would be multicam to me. It just, if anything, kind of makes you disappear, which is also worth pointing out. Multicam and a lot of these different kinds of camos under night vision, you just can't tell if someone is wearing multicam arid, multicam tropic, or sometimes even at distance, Ranger green versus tan. So that's where you start to get into seeing some images of those guys overseas wearing multicam pants, their plate carriers, but a black t-shirt. Now they're starting to use how the materials and the dyes are actually seen under night vision as an identifying factor. Sure, you can slap patches or different identifying features on your helmets like cat eyes, but you can use some of these principles to identify each other out at distance, which I find super cool. Next, if your goal really is to hide, something that will absolutely give you away are things like backlighting, movement or not knowing what your shadow is doing. Some of the grander pictures in regards to reducing your signature. You could wear a ghillie suit, but if you're standing under a street light, it doesn't matter at all. If you're curious in more of those signature reduction principles, go check out the video that we actually did on signature reduction. That was a grind to get done, but there's a ton of information there on how you can do a better job of hiding in the daytime or at night. Patreon always gets first access to content just like this every single week. Huge shout out to them. Thank you guys for making Nick employed, us employed, and keeping us going every day. With that, I think that's all we got for you. We have some materials that need to be given back to some of our friends and some stuff that hopefully we can return. Thanks for watching. Have a good weekend.
Keep rolling. Josh. Dude, you caught on fire. You don't know this, but you caught on fire. Really?